Okay, we're getting the road on the show. Good afternoon, a lovely day out. A few less people than usual, but it's quality, not quantity that counts. Anyway, um, doing more ancient history today and next time. If you remember, um, we do have an essay due tomorrow on ancient media that's we still use today. I mean, the whole point is that, why study all this old stuff if it doesn't matter? Well, a lot of it does. That's kind of the point. Show you a few bits. I think one of the biggest issues that people had is, and still do, is still is coming up with a topic. Sorry. It has to be a media thing. Now, so for example, somebody talked about jewelry, ancient jewelry. Yes, jewelry goes back a long way. Is it mediated? Is there something between you and the audience when you are wearing jewelry? No, you're seeing it in person, or you're wearing it in person. So there's no medium. So no, right there. It's very personal. And it's not, unless you're wearing it in front of a big audience, it's not mass media. Someone in this class asked about music. Music is there something between you and the audience when we listen to music? The answer is, it depends. If you are reading, recorded music certainly is mass media. Written down music is media, but sitting and listening to a concert or to somebody or somebody at a restaurant, that is not media. That is live. You are with the person. So if you're doing music, concentrate on, again, transmitted music, which again goes back to ancient times. Somebody asked about a sculpture. Is there something between you and the audience? No. On sculpture, I suppose the Statue of Liberty might be something. The Statue of Liberty could be considered media because it's from a group. It is from the people of France to the United States. To a mass audience, the United States. Technology, yes. So the Statue of Liberty represents a message of shared liberty and values between the people of France and the people of America. So one could argue that's media, but not all statues work like that. So, I mean, if it's just a statue, no. So, I mean, the whole point of this assignment is to really use this whole what is media and really use that. I don't know if this helps, but this is kind of the point. So think about that. I answer the emails. I will get drafts through tomorrow afternoon, about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. After that, no, I'll be out doing stuff. So that's where we are. Today, we'll go from ancient media to Western civilization. Now, there are lots of, by the way, any questions on any of the stuff on this week's essay? Okay.
Is there like a certain title you want it to have? Like, because right now my title is just ancient media.
Well, yeah, ancient media is fine for a title. I don't really care what you call it. Call it whatever you choose.
Okay.
You know, a book, an artifact, but it has to involve media. Lots of people have come up with some good ideas. I'm just, half of it, again, something in the media that we still use. Again, the most common one is the Bible. And that's fine, but do a book of the Bible. The book of Genesis has a different story than the epistles. And we'll talk a little about the epistles today. So do we need, yes. Do we need to cite our sources? Yes. Use sources in the text and list them at the end. Good question, because like biblical things, just quoting the Bible and saying what it means to you or to another congregant, that's fine. But what is the historical meaning of, okay, we'll talk today about the epistles of Paul. The epistles of Paul were meant to reach out beyond the Jewish community to the Romans, the Thessalonians, the Corinthians, to people beyond Israel. That's the real historical thing. So think about that in other things as well. Okay. Western civilization, again, we're shifting from just literacy all over to Western civilization. Why? Well, we're speaking English. We studied the Greeks and Romans. Now, the Chinese certainly were here at the same time. There were cultures in Africa. There were cultures in the Americas. Civilizations equally advanced. But one of the things that the Western people did is, do maps count as ancient media? Let's go through. This is what I want you to do. There's a map. Is it between you and the audience? Yes, you're reading a map. It's from a group or individuals. Yes, it's printed. To a mass audience. Yes, we all look at maps using a technology. Yes. So maps count. Go back to this and use it. Anyway, back to what we're talking about. Western civilization. Again, we're speaking English. We come from a Western tradition. Why? They used the media. I'll show you a little bit about it. Hey, I used this earlier today. Let me use another browser. I had no problem with this in an earlier class.
Have you ever wondered at the fact that people all over the world speak English? I do. Throughout most of history, languages have tended to break off from one another. People who speak the same language get separated somehow, and over the years, these groups' languages shift away from each other. First, they become different accents, then different dialects, then entirely different languages. Yet there is a force that counteracts this natural tendency, and that is an empire. Empires span many different states with many different languages. For obvious reasons, the language of the dominant empire ends up being adopted by its member states. Imperial administrators tend to impose their language on the states they govern, and member states, in turn, attempt to learn the imperial language. This helps them communicate with their overlords. It also helps them to share in the knowledge and information available in the empire. Perhaps the best example.
See, we speak English because the English started the country here.
This phenomenon was Alexander the Great's empire. Now, Alexander the Great's empire was not long-lived.
Okay, Alexander the Great was a king in southern Greece. He conquered all sorts of things in Persia, Egypt, all the way to India. By the way, you know what's over here where he stopped? Anybody? You know what's right in here?
The Himalayas.
Himalayas, yes. Kind of south and bordering the Himalayas. Afghanistan. The Afghans beat back the Greeks. They beat back the British, the Russians, and us. History kind of gives us some lessons, even if those lessons are 2,300 years old.
It broke into several smaller kingdoms almost as soon as it was formed. Yet there was one enduring aspect of Alexander's campaign of conquest, and that was Hellenization. Hellenization refers to Alexander the Great's practice of bringing Greeks with him on his conquests and installing them as administrators in his growing empire. The result was that Greek culture, philosophy, art, and language were quickly spread across the ancient world. Though Alexander's empire soon crumbled, the Greek...
There you go. You had the Greek language and influence all through here. Plus, here in Alexandria, they founded a library. The library at Alexandria held up to the Middle Ages, and that's where they stored all the wisdom from all over the area.
Administrators stayed put, and Greek soon became the universal language of the ancient world. Linguistic expansion under Alexander spread Greek as a common language.
There you go.
Anyone who was anyone in the Mediterranean basin could read and write Greek. Later, under the Romans, everyone who was anyone could read and write Latin. Just like nowadays, anyone who's anyone in the world can read and write in English.
There
The
you go.
importance of a common...
Because of empires, organizations spread the culture and use a common language. And how do we understand common languages? Through the media.
Which cannot be understated. So what if you've got a sweet written language? It doesn't help a lick if people don't understand it. What's the point of being able to read and write if you don't know the lingo? Thus, though writing had been invented and refined for almost 1,000 years, knowledge was still restricted to people who shared a common language.
Yep.
Though earlier empires made efforts at linguistic unification, none were equipped with a full alphabet like the...
Okay. So you had the common language spread far and wide. And
The
what?
British are coming. The British are coming.
Yeah. And what did they read? But plays and philosophy and ideas. By the way, I was there. I've also lost 30 pounds, but yes, I was there. What do we get from the Greek civilization? Myths and stories, religion, narrative theater, most of our theater. Here are some topics for your essays: philosophy, culture, the idea that people can govern themselves rather than have kings and priests, that democracy, demos meaning people, comes from Greek. Of course, while the Athenians were talking about democracy, the Spartans were fighting wars, came in and just stomped them. The Spartans took over, and we had Persia came in. If you remember the old movie, The 300 and the Battle of Thermopylae, the 300 Greeks stopped the Persian army under Darius. Otherwise, we might be speaking Persian right now. By the way, where is Persia today? Anybody?
Iran.
Iran. We've had even though governments and religions have changed, we've been fighting a cultural war with the Iranians for 2,400 years. Okay, Alexander, we just talked about. Library at Alexandria stands through the Middle Ages. They kept all the writing from everybody else. Then the Greeks kind of dissipated, and the Romans came in. And we talk about the empire. You could go from where writing began in Phoenicia and speak Latin and speak the same things from Baghdad and Basra down here to Armenia, to Turkey and Greece, to Spain, all the way to Britain. So same language, Latin. You could write something down in Egypt and have somebody in England understand what you say. So that big empire with the Roman roads and language and paper and scrolls and papyrus and animal hide and all sorts of stuff, you could, transmit ideas through that language. Laws, roads, and someone mentioned newspapers. The first daily newspaper, Julius Caesar. We'll go back and look at who we got. You look at Rome, you got Caesar. Why was Caesar why do we remember him so much? He was their first dictator, but they had other big Romans. His nephew Augustus, or his adopted son Augustus, Claudius, Trajan, all these, Hadrian, all these guys. But we remember Caesar because he had a daily newspaper called Acta Diurna, literally, my day, what I did today. Every day he would go out and he would write down, or have his PR agent write down what he wrote and spread it throughout the empire. So people knew what he was up to. Back to the map. He was out here. He went to Britain for a little bit and said, whoa, we crossed the channel. We were in Britain. How's that happening? And everybody in Rome and the whole empire heard about it. Meanwhile, his great rival, Gaius Pompey, was based here in Greece and Egypt. Much more people, better weather. They're in the middle of it all, whereas Caesar's out here. But when Caesar came to Rome, people knew about him. They didn't really hear much about Gaius Pompey, except he was a rich guy. So he was famous. Politicians today use the media to become famous. We remember Caesar. We don't really remember Gaius Pompey, except for the word pompous, which means you're a big fat fart. And that's where the word pompous comes from. Gaius Pompey, again, using the newspaper to trash his opponent. So, and then of course we remember Caesar through Shakespeare. And again, we had the newspaper, you had the histories that were retained in Alexandria and elsewhere. Again, he was a media guy. he wasn't much of, he wasn't much of a general. He would say, "Ooh, today we have beat the Helvetians." You know who the Helvetians were? The Helvetians were the Swiss, big woo. But people knew about it. Beware the eyes, Clint. Okay, what else spread in that same empire? Christianity. You see, the Christian empire goes from here to down here, same Roman roads, same everything. So, and they were writing in Latin. This is the difference that Paul made when we talk about the spread of Christianity. Originally, the scriptures were written in Aramaic and then translated into Hebrew and Greek and Latin. Originally, the Gospels and the scriptures were meant for the Jews. Paul, who was a Greek, wrote the epistles in Greek, sent them to the Romans, the Corinthians, the Thessalonians, spread the word of God beyond the Middle East to the rest of the empire. There are those who say one of the reasons Christianity became famous because Jesus had 12 good Jewish PR men. I'm not going to argue with that. Getting the word out. And again, the word maintained in letters, in scrolls, in the media. So powerful, Christianity becomes the official language of the whole shooting match in 330. The Romans weren't all that serious about their own religion. The Christians were very serious about theirs. Rome falls after 476. The barbarians, different tribes come in. Now, go back a little bit. Justinian restores the empire about 100 years later. But then guess what? They had a pandemic. The plague comes, wipes out what little they had. But we'll go back a little bit. Okay, Justinian starts here. He takes over all of this. Plague comes in from here. People die out. And Dark Ages, things are bad. Except at the edges of the empire, out here at the very edges in Scotland and Britain and in Ireland, we have
lights are all around us. They light up. In principio erat verbum. In the beginning was the Word.
the word. There you go. That keeps you going. You had these monks in monasteries, mostly way up in the north, where they're writing down on parchment, which is made from animal hide, Bibles, keeping the language alive.
There was a man of venerable life and blessed memory, the father and founder of
Saint Columba, one of the first monastics, started a school on the island of Iona outside of, just outside of Scotland, gathered the monks together, and they all just sat down for a long time and wrote down and rewrote the scriptures.
monasteries, who was given the same name as the prophet Jonah. For what is pronounced Iona in Hebrew and is called Columba in Latin means one and the same thing, a dove.
Well, actually, his name was John, but yeah.
In the last years of the world, a son will come, whose name Columba will be famous throughout all these ocean islands of Ireland, Scotland, and the Western world. So great a name could not have been given to the man of God, but by...
Okay. And these monks are writing what we call illuminated manuscripts. They're beautiful
Son
works
of the
art.
everlasting Father, in the form of that little bird. By God's gift from the days of his infancy, our abbot was enriched with the appropriate...
Okay. So you have these monks copying Bibles, learning to read. Then they go from their little monasteries back to the continent, and they bring with them the word of God, but also the written language, and they become teachers, and they become and their town, their monasteries become universities, and they teach the nobles and the kings to read and write, and they kept civilization going. They call it the light and the dark ages. Because at the same time that Rome falls, you have somebody else doing his thing. You have Muhammad in what is now Saudi Arabia, writing down his word. And again, it is that written language, it's that text, it's the Quran. Not only did he unify the Arabs, he unified the language. He all but created the language of Arabic. That common language tied all of these people and tribes together. Started down here, spread, and again, all the way to Afghanistan, where everybody gets stopped, all even today. Over here, you have Buddhism, and that's still there, and Hinduism. But again, the word, the written language goes from here through Egypt, through the Holy Land, Jerusalem, through what was the Byzantine Empire. But remember, this was all empty because of the plague. So they were able to sweep in all the way through the deserts, all the way to the Battle of Tours in France in 760, I think it was. Whoops. Cats. Anyway, so yes, cats on the keyboard will do that. Anyway, so that language, the book, the media, brings the word and unifies. A simple book unifies this whole part of the world. Finally stopped here by Charles Martel, whose teacher, the Venerable Bede, and Alcuin of York, guys from here, brought the word and kept the word here. This word and that word clashed, but this is where it ended. And we have been fighting with the Arab culture versus the Christian culture now for 1,300 years. And by the way, this weekend is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. Where did those guys come from? They came from Egypt. They came from Saudi Arabia. Again, this world and our world have been in conflict for 1,300 years.
In my mind, I think 9/11 made those poor relations even worse.
Yeah, well, it's like a lot of things. We talk about causality, and yeah, there's a lot of causes. I don't want to go.
That's your fault, Al
But yeah,
Qaeda.
but I think most historians would agree that things have gotten more tense since that time. And again, and where did bin Laden, who planned all this thing, he was actually an Arabian, but he was hiding out in Afghanistan. Again, we've been fighting in Afghanistan since Alexander the Great, 2,300, 2,400 years ago. We've been fighting over the same turf and fighting the same cultural battles, again, for 2,400 years. So here we are today. But again, for the purpose of this course, the reason the Arabs were able to unify, because they had, just like the Romans, a common language, Arabic. They had a book, the Quran. We have the Bible, they have the Quran. So this is not only a battle of culture, but it's a battle of the books. And again, the reason we do this is because of the power of the written word. So think about that. Bring to the ancient world, and we'll get into the Middle Ages and up to free speech next week. So think about all of that as we go through ancient stuff for the next day or two. Anyway, so any other questions? Okay, I think we're, yeah. What?
Does it seem like the Greek? Does it seem like does it seem like the Greeks and Romans had actually hired all of influenced all of us?
You need somebody smarter than me to answer that one. We study the Greeks and Romans. That is a tradition that educators come from. Now, it can be argued that we do too much of that we don't study African or Mesoamerican cultures enough, because they've influenced us too. I'm just following the tradition that I know. But again, the ideas of democracy and freedom, a lot of our theater and music and culture goes back to the Greeks. So that's my answer, but it's, again, not the only answer. Anyway, any other stuff? Well, I appreciate it, and the cats appreciate it, and we will see you next Tuesday. Send me messages, texts. I will review drafts through tomorrow afternoon at about 2-ish. All right, have a good weekend.